Felt kind of like Groundhog's Day on Saturdays. Boston College gets blown out by Wake Forest in Winston-Salem. It was a close game for a bit, but it really never felt that close. On today's show, we're going to be joined by Mitch Wolf to talk about what happened and get into where does BC go from here. All that and more on today's Locked On BC.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On BC, AJ Black here, joined as always with Mondays with Mitch. Mitch Wolf, how's it going?
Doing all right. Game was very frustrating in the moment, but after thinking about it, like we talked about on Friday, this was kind of the expected result. So, you kind of have to rethink about it and say this is what we expected. It just, was never really going to go BC's way, and that's what happened.
All right, before we get into this episode of Locked On Boston College is brought to you by Sling TV. Sling has something for everyone, especially when it comes to college football coverage. With the massive lineup of games across the ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12, and SEC, I can always catch the games I want on Sling, and now you can too. Check out Sling TV now to see the massive lineup of games they have all season long. Sling, the TV you love for a price you'll love. Try it today. All right, so 43-15. I had the prediction at 42-14, so I wasn't that far off. It felt like there were points where it felt like BC could come back, but Sam Hartman, what do you have, 6 touchdowns?
Yeah, something like that.
He was just methodical, and he just shredded up BC's defense. And then we just got back into watching one of the most frustrating offenses in the country do what they do best, which is play frustrating football.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, like you said, there were times where BC had their moments, like that first field goal drive, but they mismanaged how they were calling the game. So they had to burn 2 timeouts and they only got a field goal out of it. Wake gets the ball after that. They immediately score. BC kind of got lucky on that insane drive with the fake punt and then the double fumble and then the Zay touchdown. That was kind of crazy. And, BC's only down by 5 at that point, but then Wake goes right down the field again and scores to extend the lead again. BC had a few opportunities in the final 2 minutes of the first half, but couldn't get anything going. They had the touchdown in the third quarter to bring it within 13, and then they got the interception, but then they couldn't do anything after that. And then Wake scored touchdowns on consecutive drives, and it was essentially over at that point.
Right. And it felt like it was too easy at points for Wake. And I know he's going back to the injuries thing. They lose Elijah Jones during the game, which was a big loss because he's been playing well. It's so funny. It seems like every team targets him. They just go at him through the whole game. But do you have any thoughts on why they're doing that?
I think most teams think that he's a little aggressive in terms of Wake really likes to exploit the defense in terms of defensive pass interference. So going after a guy that is a little handsy is, good for drawing penalties.
Yep.
They actually had Donovan Green on him, and then which was kind of surprising. I thought BC would try to get Jones on A.T. Perry, but and then he's not, in terms of straight line speed, he's not the fastest. So I can see why teams did it, but I thought in his limited snaps, he was actually pretty decent. I think people might get frustrated by saying, Wake threw all over them. And it's like they did, but there were very few times where, there were times where it happened, sure. But it wasn't a matter of Wake just, repeatedly just finding these guys wide open in space and them getting huge chunks of plays. They had to make really contested catches, especially early in the game. Amari Jackson was playing well early. Jones was playing well early as well. DeBerry had some nice plays. So every time the commentators had it, they were this is great coverage by the defender. It's just a better throw and a better catch. On Hartman's throw to the end zone, I think it was their first touchdown where he hit the guy on the back shoulder. Yep. I think it was Jackson was in perfect position, but it was, again, perfect ball. It's hard to defend those. So, you give them some credit. And then we talked about on Friday, the key to this game was BC's offense staying on the field, keeping Wake's offense off the field, and giving the defense time to rest. And at the end of the day, they just couldn't do that. And I think because of that, the more cracks you give Wake Forest, they're just gonna eventually break it wide open. And they talked about how Wake runs one of the fastest tempo offense in the country. They have average, I think, 30 seconds between snaps, and then they run, I think, an average of, I think they're one of the highest in terms of number of plays that run teams, like they're in the 70s or 80s. So,
Yep.
This was just a recipe for disaster. And then, we learn for BC's offense that Drew Kendall's going to be out. Finn Durstein's out for the year. So Jackson Ness has to kick inside to center. Nick Thomas has to start at left guard. So you're essentially playing a third string left guard, a backup center who hadn't played the position until summer, a backup right guard who switched over from defensive line, a backup right tackle who was supposed to be playing guard, and you have a starting left tackle who, we say that Ozzie has been the best player. He has his share of struggles, as would any, he's still a first year starter, and he's playing the toughest position on the offensive line, but maybe besides center. So, he's going to have his, days where he's not as good. This was one of them where he allowed 4 pressures, 1 sack, and had a penalty. So, this is just not, it was just not going to work.
Yep. And if we're talking about the offense and offensive line, I don't want to call out a kid. Well, let's just look at it in another.
I had a friend text me about this, and he says, we always preface saying this with that. But I mean, I think we need to call a spade here.
Well, let's just say that he struggled a lot.
Yeah.
And I go back to, I can sort of change where I'm looking at this. And we've talked about this, Mitch. How the heck I know they're skimming throughout their offensive line to find anyone that can play. And Halfley's like, yeah, we don't have this guy and this guy and this guy, but you've got at least Jude Bowery and Elijah Krasnovic. I don't know why you haven't tried either of them.
Bowery's playing. When they go 6 offensive linemen, he's coming on the field. So, and he had to play some right tackle as well. He only had, 6 pass block reps, and he allowed 2 pressures. So again, that's not that great either, but I would still want to see it. Again, and those guys are playing against Rondell Bothroyd, who is Wake's best edge defender and arguably their best defender overall. So, there are times where that guy's going to beat you, but the number of times where Jack Conley just got embarrassed was insane. And on 3-man rushes where, it's like guy to wide 9, what he's going to do. And he just completely set wrong and then just allowed himself to get bull rushed back into the quarterback. It's just, on 45 pass blocking reps, 6 pressures, 4 hurries, 1 hit, 1 sack. And I can't believe there's only 1 sack. I'm pretty sure there's at least 1 more, and 3 penalties, 2 of which were questionable false start penalties, I'm pretty sure. So I'll wipe some of those off. But I've said all I can say about this, but it's just, I just can't understand why. Again, like I tweeted out, I think that Jeff Halfley committed a crime in some way, shape, or form, and Jack Conley saw it, and he's using that leverage against Halfley to make sure he stays in the starting lineup. That's really, at this point, that's the most logical explanation for why he's still in the lineup, because there are just plays where he gets beat in 2 seconds and the entire play is dead. And again, people say, you can try to coach, scheme up some things and coach some things where that doesn't happen. And it's yeah, you can, sure, but especially in a game like this where you do have to come back, there are plays where you're just going to have to, do a normal pass set and win your one-on-one matchup. And Conley just can't do that. And, I think people will be like, oh, it's because, there's a new offensive line coach. He's not good. It's these problems were here last year. You could argue that Googs hasn't improved Conley, which I would definitely agree with that. But I really just don't think there's any way to improve it. I just think the guy is just not good. He's not a ACC starting caliber offensive lineman. Might not even be an FBS caliber starting offensive lineman, to be honest.
It was interesting. There was some really, other than our friend that we were just talking about, there was some really good pass block grades for BC.
The 2
guards.
Alec
had a really good game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's because Wake doesn't have as much of a great interior pass rusher, but yeah, he had a great pass protecting grade. Even Jackson Ness, Halfley praised him, and I think that some of that praise is deserved. Obviously, there were some issues with the snaps. Some went high, some went low. There was timing issues, and I know I talked about coming out of the bye week should be helpful, but if you're a guy like Jackson Ness, you're still learning a new position. You're learning this offense at the center position. That there are going to be those hiccups. But for him to at least be decent in terms of once the ball is snapped, that is nice to see at least. But yeah, at the end of the day, BC couldn't run the ball to save their lives. Danny Long was their leading rusher on that fake punt. None of the running backs had more than, I think, 6 yards. Jurkovec had some nice runs, but they actually used him in the designed running game, which was nice to see, to at least, add a new wrinkle to the offense. But they just couldn't block. There was just every run was getting stuffed behind the line of scrimmage, it seemed. So they're just really, and, in the passing game, I thought Jurkovec was okay. He missed a decent amount of throws. Just placement wasn't super great.
I'm going to pause you there because I want to talk more about Jurkovec after the break.
Sure.
Because I think he's a hot button topic that I think a lot of folks want to hear more about. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our good friends over at Nissan. Nissan has worked with us to create a new segment across the Locked On College Network titled Thrilling Moments, where we highlight the most exciting plays from the Boston College weekend game or throughout the history of our alma mater. This week's thrilling moment from the Eagles is Matt Ryan's big win in Virginia Tech in 2007. Now, Matt Ryan, that was a game where BC looked like they were down and out, and he leads BC back for a big come from behind win in a game that was so important for the future of this program. And just to look at how far BC has fallen off since then. But it was such a big moment in the rain in Blacksburg. Now, this segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. All right, we're back, and we're talking about our friend Phil Jurkovec. And I want to get your perspective on this because it feels like I feel like it's Groundhog's Day every week. And some of that I get is on the offensive line, but Jurkovec has struggled too. And you were about to start getting into it. But he missed some really easy passes at different points. And I don't know. There's something about his throws too that just look wobblier than usual. I don't know. Let me hear a little bit about what you're thinking about Jurkovec right now.
I think that the just complete breakdown of the offensive line I think it shattered his confidence a little bit. And I think that it's messed with his, internal clock as a quarterback. So I think like whenever he's dropping back, like in the back of his mind, he's like, all right, like where can I escape to, so I can keep the play alive as opposed to just reading the defense. I think that that's part of it.
Yep.
I think, and I think that, some of the issues that he's had in the past, some just kind of like missing some of those easy throws. Those get exacerbated when your offensive line is putrid and you're not able to, go through your process like normal. So that's part of it. And, a lot of the times, like when he did miss some of those easy ones, like he was being flushed. Like I know there was that one play where he got flushed out to the left a little bit. And then he, tried to dump it to, I think, Joseph Griffin, but then they were saying, oh, like Zay Flowers is wide open down the field. And, when you're kind of running to your left as a right-handed quarterback, throwing that, 15-yard sail or out/corner route, that's a tough throw to make for most quarterbacks, especially when there's a guy like right behind you. I think if Phil would have tried to like set his feet properly, make that throw, it would have been a sack. So,
yep.
I get him trying to dump it down to the easy one. He just couldn't complete it. But there were some other ones, even like there was that one play where he kind of tried to hit Garwo out of the backfield and just led him too far. And Garwo probably could have caught it. It was close. There was a few plays where he and Zay seem to kind of have some miscommunications. And that seems to happen a decent bit. So I'm not sure exactly why that's happening. It is impressive considering that it is a relatively frequent occurrence. Yeah. And Zay Flowers is still as dynamic as he is. So, and I every week now we're hearing the calls for Emmett Moorhead. And I still really don't think that is a viable solution because I think Emmett Moorhead has a lot of the same issues that Phil has in terms of, and the other issue is that Emmett Moorhead is not as mobile or able to extend plays as Jurkovec is. So a lot of those pressures that Jurkovec gets where he is able to, at least buy some time and, maybe just throw it away, yep. I think those would turn into sacks for Moorhead. And I still think he has some of those issues of just not being overly accurate. So I don't think that's the right answer, honestly. And, I'm not sure how much we'll talk about it, but luckily BC has some more winnable games in the near future. So, ideally this is a good opportunity for the offense to, try to get some semblance of some good things going. But yeah, I mean, overall it is very frustrating for Jurkovec. I think that we might've just bought into the hype a little too much. Yep. I think I did, kind of looking at some of his play, even across the last few years with a more critical eye, you can kind of see where it's like, okay, like we might've just overestimated his physical talent. Even like, yep. There are times where, he's not able to make some of those downfield throws. It's like, okay, I just don't think he has the arm talent or arm strength to make those throws like, guys that we thought he would be. Like I was thinking about this the other day and I was like, he kind of starting to remind me of and this is a very random comparison, but Steven Montez, who was a quarterback for Colorado for a few years ago, who I think switched to tight end in the NFL. So, big guy who can move around a decent bit, but just isn't consistently accurate. So, and the problem is, like, I just don't think there's really any way we see this getting better unless the offensive line, makes a drastic improvement. And I think at this point, given that the bye week is passed, I think I'm not sure if I said this, but the bye week probably would have been the time to make those changes in terms of who's playing on the offensive line, because you give them that extra week to prepare. Obviously, they had to make changes that were instigated by injury. So that was one part of it. But I think that now, even though it's back to a normal week schedule, like, I think you really need to start thinking about plugging different guys in, because I mean, the offense just can't consistently move the ball with the guys who are playing now.
Right. And to the folks, I know some folks, like you mentioned it, were kind of, calling for Emmett Moorhead. I agree with you. Like, I don't think there's, the rationale I hear all the time is what could it hurt? And my response is it could hurt a lot, because if you let Moorhead out there and he's getting clobbered every week by this offensive line that he has no clue how to manage, you're going to then get him into the same skitter, like
it's what happened to David Carr with the Texans when they first started. Like, he got the crap beat out of him like every game, every week. And like, eventually it just broke his brain to the point that he couldn't be a serviceable NFL quarterback anymore. And, obviously this would be a much smaller sample size of Moorhead, with 5 games left this year. Next year, I knock on wood saying this, but I can't imagine the offensive line being worse next year unless they get, destroyed by an injury plague again. So, next year it could improve. But yeah, I mean, I think you ride out Jurkovec, because again, I think he at least gives you that opportunity. He has that key, I know that there are issues with, his relationship with Zay in terms of like those miscommunications, but he's still able to, he still has a lot of faith in him. He still throws in the ball a ton, and he does have the ability to extend plays and be more of a threat as a runner. So I still think, despite some of these issues, of the quarterbacks on the team, Jurkovec gives you the best opportunity to win on a weekly basis.
All right. In our final segment, I'm going to talk with Mitch about where Jeff Hafley stands as a coach and look at the last five games, as we have 5 games left in the season, and where BC is at and what they could do to finish off the year. Before we do that, sweat is something that everyone deals with. I am a big time sweater, and when I wear a dress shirt, it's always a Russian roulette whether I am going to sweat through it or not. But that all changed when I found SweatBlock. SweatBlock changed the game for me. It was created by a doctor to help with excessive sweating. Doctor created and doctor recommended. It works like a charm. You basically wipe it on before you go to bed, and you are good to go the next day. No more sweat, no more embarrassing stains. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try SweatBlock and save 20% off. Promo code locked on at sweatblock.com. Also available on Amazon. This is Locked On BC. AJ Black here. I'm with Mitch Wolf. It's our Mondays with Mitch. If you're listening to this and you have not done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube page. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button right now. You get all of our videos sent directly to you, and you can also comment and talk along with other fans. And so we'll get into Jeff Hafley in a second, but we have a question from our comment section. Lynn Suber asks, "Hey AJ, is the offensive line coach the problem?" Mitch, I'll let you answer that one.
I don't think so. I think the tools he's been given to work with just aren't good enough. And that's because of the injury bug. Like, we saw guys like, Drew Kendall was improving. We saw, Finn Durstein in the few games that he played was playing decently well. Ostrapilo, like I said, he struggled this week. He had some issues with Clemson, but everybody does. But he was good early in the season. I think he's still playing through injury. So you're seeing guys like that play decently well. And even Dwayne Alec, like, is having his moments.
Yep.
And, Jackson Ness, again, I think was a problem, but, when he's a guard, it's not good, but it wasn't, it's not catastrophic. I don't think that is the biggest problem. I think, obviously there's room for improvement, but, if I'm the coach, and I think you were seeing some improvement with some of the other players. but then the injury bug obviously hits that puts a wrench in things. So I wouldn't say the offensive line coach is a problem at this point.
All right, so let's get into the coaching. So Halfley's got 5 more games left. You got UConn this week, Duke, NC State, and Notre Dame and Syracuse. Where can the season go? Like, where do you predict the rest of the season goes, Mitch?
Well, I think now, I think we also need to take the Wake loss with a bit of a grain of salt because, again, like we said going into the game, this was probably never going to be a win. This was going to be not super competitive. It was honestly more competitive than it probably had any right to be. And Wake is probably they're a top 15, maybe top 12 team in the country. They're just very well coached, very, very well organized, good team. So, give Wake some credit. They beat an inferior team, and that's to be expected. So I don't think we can be like, oh, like BC really deserved to win this one because they just never did. So looking at the next few games, I think at UConn versus Duke and I think all 3 of those are winnable. 2 of them should be wins. At UConn, pretty much. I mean, if they lose to UConn, then I can't really even imagine what we're gonna say or what this team is gonna do because, Duke is winnable. Duke has had some nice moments this season. They just came off a big win against Miami, but Miami turned the ball over 8 times. You're not going to see that every week. So, I think Duke. I think that's a home game for BC. It's a night game, so that'll be helpful for them. NC State, like I've said most of the season, even before the Leary injury, that they were overrated, and now that Leary's out for the season, like they're still ranked, but I don't think that'll last. Notre Dame is hard to figure out, but I think they're going to just eventually be too talented across the board for BC to really stand a chance against because of how bad BC is. And then home against Syracuse, Syracuse kind of got gypped out of a win against Clemson. And I noticed this in the 2 games in BC's game and the Clemson game that, the refs in the ACC really, really like to see favorites win. They really want to make sure that, teams that are playing well, that are, the favorite teams get every opportunity to, win the game, whether by, calling penalties that shouldn't be called or not calling penalties that should be called, but I digress. But Syracuse is still a pretty solid squad. That is BC's last home game. So, you hope you get a bit of a juice from that, especially because Syracuse is going to be running through the gauntlet of tough teams in this back half of the season. So, maybe BC surprises people there, but I'm not optimistic about it. So, BC win. I'm seeing like 4-8, 5-7. And, I think this team has just not been overall just not been good. The injuries in the offensive line have really just completely hampered the offense. The injuries in the secondary have not been as problematic, but they've still hurt. And, I think that the inability of the offense to consistently hold drives together has been a major issue that hurts the defense. Like we've said for weeks that, I think if even against Louisville, they just gave them some opportunities to rest and, just gave them some time to recuperate, even though it was a high scoring, back and forth game. But man, if they can just hold a few drives together, just give this defense a chance to rest. Cause like I said, with Wake, there were plays where, Wake just had to make really incredible plays and they were able to do so, but BC was in good position to stop them. Until kind of the end of the game, I wouldn't say that Wake was really, they weren't really getting much in the running game. And I think that was, their leading rusher was Justice Ellison, who was the starter, but he only had 36 yards. Hartman had 1 rushing touchdown. So, they took away the run game, which is good to see. But then obviously they got killed in the passing game. And, BC was a little more true to their traditional game plan than I expected in terms of playing man coverage and single high safety stuff. But again, I thought for the, most of the first half and even a bit into the second half, they were playing decently well. They got Wake off the field sometimes. But then the problems would arise when, the BC offense would go 3 and out and send them right back out in the field. So, I think this defense it's still not, great. It's definitely not great. You could argue it's not good, but they're encouraging signs, but they're just not being given good opportunities. So, I think this season we do just kind of chalk this up to a throwaway. It's just, the team is just not as good. And the injuries have really hurt them. So, I'm hoping for, 2, hopefully maybe get 3 wins. If it's 2, I understand. So, I guess if they do get to 3, then they could be, one of those 5-7 bowl teams. But again, I feel like Halfley might, I feel like he might reject that bowl invitation, honestly.
That'd be the third straight year without or was it almost 4 or 5? Like, can you imagine that if like BC?
No, I guess it's only 3 because it was 2020 was COVID year, 2021 bowl. There was a bowl game which got canceled, and then, this year it doesn't look likely. But
then you add in the Lightning game.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just BC has the stupidest bowl
Mhm.
record. But before you go, Mitch, I think the big question folks have is how hot do you think Jeff Halfley's seat is? I don't think it's that hot. I think folks are really getting themselves up and rightfully so getting upset about what they're seeing. But I feel like he's got at least a year or two more to get his recruiting classes through and see if he is the answer or if he's not.
I think he has until 2024. I think that if they essentially like lose out the rest of the season, I think that might be a problem. Like 2-10, no matter. I don't really like when people say injuries aren't an excuse, because when they affect one position group so focused, like the offensive line, like I think it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. But even with that, I think going 2-10 or I won't say 3-9, but 2-10 would be a problem. And even then, I still don't think he would get fired. I might not advocate for it, but I would understand.
Yeah.
I think the issue with Halfley is, and I think you saw this with he still has some of those issues with timeouts, which, we see NFL coaches struggle with timeouts, and, so it's not unique to him or college coaches or anything, but, he is obviously a first-time head coach. He's still kind of learning about some things. Sometimes the end of half management is a little confusing. But even when BC was, getting clobbered late in the third and into the fourth quarter, like I still saw the team playing hard. He mentioned in the post-game press conference about how guys are, still being positive, holding each other accountable. So I don't think he's lost the team or lost the locker room or anything yet. So that is encouraging to see. These next 2 games where BC actually has a decent chance to win. We'll see how those go. I think the seat is warm, I'll say lukewarm. But I don't think it's hot yet. I think he has at least 2 more seasons. If next year comes and it's another bottoming out, I think maybe you could even see that timeline accelerated by a year. But I think it would have to be another like really, really bad year where the team just doesn't look competitive, even against teams that they should be competitive against.
And they have a very easy out of conference schedule next year, and I think they have a pretty reasonable in conference schedule. Because they don't play Clemson next year.
Oh, thank God! Finally.
Yep. All right, Mitch, we're gonna end this right now. Tell people where they can find your work.
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE, on Twitter, and I just updated the Zay Flowers record tracker, so we'll be getting that update up. And I mean, this was a good game for him. So, I think I was saying to Asia that if they really, really feed him against UConn, we could see him break some of those career records, which would be exciting. And I mean, at this point, that's one of the few things that BC fans would be excited about is Zay Flowers breaking some team records.
Yeah, and we have tons of content up on the site right now. We'll be getting some stuff about basketball back up again. Check out Eagle Insider and become a member. It is, if you sign up monthly, it's only $1 for the first month, but we have some really great deals for yearly subscriptions as well. This is AJ Black. If you're not done so already, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just hit that subscribe button. It only takes 2 seconds and helps out the podcast tremendously. For Mitch Wolfe, this is AJ. Take care, everyone.